Hello, everybody. This is Norel Kalam. Welcome to my video discussion on one of our topics for science, technology, and society. For today, we will look at something that I believe would interest all of you. Now, this video discussion will be on religion versus science. Okay, now, often when discussing things about science, there is always the question of which do you believe more, religion or science, right? Whenever you discuss something that is related to science, this question always pops out in your minds. You would always ask yourselves, or you would even often ask your instructors and professors, Sir, ma'am, which do you believe more, religion or science? Now, this has been a very interesting topic to many, like what I'm saying. However, a bit of a disclaimer lang, this discussion will not lead you to choose to believe one of the two, but rather to just give you a brief background on how these clash of two topics came to be. Again, this is just an overview of how these two things came to like oppose each other throughout the years. So we're not here to like encourage or like bring you into believing one of these two, but again rather to just give you an insight into the rich, very rich history of the debate between religion and science. So without further ado, let's get right to our discussion. The religion versus science debate in recent years has started to dominate the news, spreading across thousands of internet sites and forums. Now, it is always a hot topic, which often stirs up discussions and even arguments from varying perspectives and groups of people. I think you yourselves have already been in a situation nga na ay like opposing na perspectives whenever you encounter people who are into science or who are into more into religion. Now, I think you're no longer foreign, you're no longer unfamiliar, right? To these kinds of debate between these two opposing concepts. Now, the rise in religious fundamentalism has been mirrored by a rise in scientific fundamentalism. When we say fundamentalism, it means or it has something to do with strict adherence to some belief or ideology. Like what one believes is what's true and nothing else. For example, those who um, line themselves with religious fundamentalism would tend to be those kinds of person nga grabe ka strict ang ilang adherence to their religious beliefs. Okay? And anything that they think is opposing to their set of beliefs is not true for them. Again, they are very strict to their adherence to their ideas, their beliefs, their culture. Okay, so that is what we mean by fundamentalism. So it is said that as religious fundamentalism has risen over the years, so did scientific fundamentalism, meaning as one of these two concepts grows, so does the other. And as more and more people adhere to their strict belief in either science or religion, history went through a divide on people's beliefs, known as the Great Rift. So, this is where the debate on religion versus science started, as more and more people adhere to their strict belief in either science or religion. This is what caused the very rich history of the debate between science and religion, which we often refer to as the Great Rift. In line with the debate on religion versus science, is the debate between intelligent design versus evolution. So, the rise on intelligent design versus evolution debate has also took place. Now, when we say intelligent design, this is a pseudo-scientific set of beliefs based on the notion that life on Earth is so complex that it cannot be explained by the scientific theory of evolution and therefore must have been designed by a supernatural entity. So what I'm trying to say here is that intelligent design is the 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 belief about kinibitang when you look at the complexity of our universe, makita nato that it is very detailed, it is very complex, it is very organized in such a way nga murag dili ta makatuo nga walay someone or something of a divine status, perhaps. It has been the one responsible for creating all that exists. Okay? So that is what intelligent design is all about. Na a certain maker, creator of all the things that are existing in our universe right now. And it cannot be something caused by the sets of ideas laid out in the theory of evolution. So, thus leading to the debate between intelligent design and evolution. Now, intelligent design versus evolution has become a battleground, with each side drawing lines in the sand, refusing to take a backward step. Now, in the words of then USA President George W. Bush, you're either against us, or you're either with us or against us. Meaning, if you do not adhere to our sets of beliefs, if you do not share the beliefs, ideas that we have, therefore, you are against us. Okay, so murag inana ang nahitabo. People who adhere strictly to either one of these two look at it that way. You're either with us or against us. However, this is not always the case. There are eminent scientists, actually, and theologians, religious scholars, trying to reconcile the differences and promote the belief that science, religion, and philosophy can all work together. So, there are actually scientists, DI, that promote also or that sees the difference and promotes the belief of the other. So it's not always nga all scientists throughout the history like diminishes the concepts and ideas laid out in religious scriptures and the other way around. Now, what you may not know is that many scientists are actually religious individuals, and many religious leaders are actually scientists. Now, the religion versus science debate involves a few extremists. These are those who has an extreme or fanatical view on something. Kaning mga extremists sila tong gabi ka extreme ang ang belief on something that that they tend to become fanatics. Kana bitong close-minded na sila to accepting ideas that do not or that do not adhere to theirs. So that is what we refer to as extremists. And these extremists are what fueled up the debate between science and religion. However, again, there are there are actually scientists that are very religious individuals, and there are religious leaders. There are church leaders. There are bishops actually that are also studying and practicing science. Okay, now let's look at the history of the science and religion debate, and let's have some groups of people who throughout the years have been the prominent players in this very rich arguments between these two concepts. So let's start first with the Greeks. So the ancient Greek philosophers were one of the first groups to look at religion and science together. So most of them believed that there was no distinction between science and theology. Theology is the systematic study of religion. So it is said, though, that ancient Greek philosophers and scientists were the first groups of people to look at religion and science together, not as opposing factors or opposing concepts, but rather things or concepts or sets of ideas that correlate to one another. So we know of the Greeks, right? And how rich their culture and religion is many years ago, even up to this day. Now their myths and gods have, up to this day, sparked great interest to Greeks and non-Greeks alike. When it comes to matters relating to religion and culture, the Greeks were some of those who revel in them the most. But some of the greatest scientific scholars in history are in fact Greeks, and they are, interestingly, very religious too. So this image here in our slide depicts the Greek myth of Prometheus rather, and how he stole fire from the gods. So the Greeks are some of the most, or the Greeks have some of the richest stories, myths, and beliefs in their religion. However, they do not diminish also the scientific side of things. They do not diminish scientific ideas, despite the fact that they are very culture oriented, they are very religious individuals. Now, great thinkers such as Aristotle believed that science was a process of trying to understand the natural laws behind creation. So it was their view that creation was mathematically perfect and that logic and reasoning could discern the mind of the gods. So it's like, oh, while they acknowledge um, the complexity of creation and how their gods were the ones responsible for it, the Greeks believed that all of creation can be explained or can be understood by the natural laws behind them, which could be explained by science. So the Greeks looked at science and religion that way. Now, the expansion of Islam from the 9th century until the 12th century saw a renaissance. Renaissance is a French word meaning rebirth in science, known as the Islamic Golden Age. So, aside from the Greeks, Islam actually also have a very great contribution to how science paved the way for understanding how the world functions throughout the years. Now, caliphs are the Islamic leaders of the Islamic world, believed in enlightenment and set up houses of learning or houses of wisdom in different Islamic cities. Now, kaning mga caliphs, these are again Islamic leaders. Okay, and they believe in enlightenment, and because of that, they set up mga houses of wisdom in different great Islamic cities. Now, despite them being people who adhere to religion, okay, who teaches religion and the concepts that are included in their beliefs, they also acknowledge the importance of kinibitang honing or improving the pool of learning, pool of wisdom, which is why they set up these, what they so call the houses of learning. Now, cities such as Baghdad became centers of knowledge containing great libraries and universities. So, great advances in medicine, astronomy, and agriculture were made and were believed to be the will of Allah. Now, the Islamic scholars preserved the knowledge of the Greek philosophers and added new insights. Then let's go to the coming of Christianity. Now, after the Muslim age, 12th century Renaissance Europe became the seat of learning, and there was no particular schism or split or divide between science and religion during the coming of Christianity. Now, evidence of this can be seen in the following personalities, which, despite being religious individuals, are also great innovators in science. Okay, now let me introduce you to Robert Grosseteste. Now, interestingly, Grosseteste was a philosopher, a theologian, and a bishop in 13th century England. Now, he was an early Christian scientist who made great advances in geometry. So, take note, Robert Grosseteste is a bishop, a Christian bishop, and also a scientist at the same time. Now, he stated that experiments were essential to learning and the development of humanity. Now, Grosseteste's numerous short scientific works made no very significant contribution to scientific theory. However, it was believed that Grosseteste played a key role in the development of the scientific method, our systematic approach or our systematic way of understanding things, the scientific method. Now, he was also believed to give a special importance to mathematics in attempting to provide scientific explanations of the physical world. So that is Robert Grosseteste, a bishop and a scientist at the same time. Now, another individual who were a great believer in religion and science at the same time is Roger Bacon. Now, Roger Bacon is a Franciscan monk. He was regarded as one of the greatest philosophers of all time. Now, he advocated that there were distinctive laws of nature behind the cosmos, and he was also the first European to describe in detail the process of making gunpowder. Now, this is believed to be caused by his great interest in practicing alchemy. Now, Roger Bacon is often called Britain's first scientist. He was also referred to as a conjurer and a magician, perhaps could be the result of his study on alchemy. Now, Bacon was rather critical to some of the values of the Christian belief in his time. Okay? Roger Bacon daw is medyo critical. Bali, he is somewhat opposing some of the values taught of the Christian belief during his time. Now, because of this, when he entered the Franciscan order, he was openly critical to some of their values and beliefs and was thus muzzled by them. He was even allegedly sent to prison because of this, making him one of the many early scientists who have been in unpleasant situations because of their radicalism and challenge to the teachings of the Bible. Okay. Now, many scientists, aside from Bacon, suffered from this new radicalism. Okay, if you remember the line I shared to you earlier, you're either against us or you're either with us or against us. If you do not share the same beliefs that we have, therefore you are opposing our sets of beliefs and furthermore is dangerous to us. Now, challengers of the Christian teachings were persecuted. Even some suffered to great extents. Okay? Katulad ng mga early scientists who challenged Christian teachings were persecuted. Some of them suffered, some of them were sent to prison, even some of them were killed just because they do not adhere to the teachings of the Christian church. Okay. Now, in line with that, let me introduce you to Nicholas Copernicus. I think that Nicholas Copernicus is someone who's already familiar to you. Okay. Now, of all the early scientists who have been persecuted because of their study, perhaps the most famous of all is Nicholas Copernicus. Now, do you know who he is and what his contributions to science are? Okay. Now, you might wonder if Copernicus. Okay, now Nicholas Copernicus postulated the idea of heliocentrism. What is this heliocentrism? This is the astronomical model in which the Earth and the planets revolve around the Sun at the center of the universe in his work published on 1543 entitled On the Revolutions of Heavenly Spheres. Okay? So it was the Nicholas Copernicus who postulated the idea of heliocentrism. Okay, again, kaning concept of heliocentrism states that the Earth and the planets are revolving around the sun at the center of the universe. Okay? Now, you might wonder if Copernicus was the one who postulated the idea, which is now proven to be true and correct, what was the belief of early Christianity towards the solar system? So, before Copernicus postulated the idea of heliocentrism, ang ginatudlo actually sa Christian Church is an idea, okay, the concept of geocentrism. So later we will be looking into what is that. Now, Copernicus' book elaborated the concepts of geokinetic and heliocentric ideas that the Earth rotates daily on its own axis and revolves yearly around the Sun. Now, since antiquity, this idea had been considered but rejected in favor of the traditional concept that the earth stands still at the center of the universe. So what the religious scholars were teaching before is the concept of geocentrism. Okay? Now what is this geocentrism all about? This, according to this concept, geocentrism is the model which states that the earth is at the center of the universe. Okay? And that the sun and all the other planetary bodies are revolving around us. Okay? So mao na siya ang ginatudlo sa Christian church before, sa religious scholars before, that the the sun is at the center of the universe. I mean, the earth is at the center of the universe, and that the sun and all the other planets are revolving around the earth. Okay, so that is the idea of geocentrism is all about. Now, the concept of the geostatic idea rather states that the Earth does not rotate on its axis, meaning nagpundo lang siya. Static lang yun siya. Wala siya nag-rotate, wala siya nag-revolve. Okay? So, wala siya nag-move on its axis and it's just um, static on its place and all the other heavenly bodies are revolving around it. Okay? So, therefore, we can see here that Copernicus's idea of heliocentrism and the geokinetic idea of his is somewhat opposing to the teachings of the Christian Church, which is why medyo na kuan ni siya si Copernicus, medyo siya na hot, uh, na put at a hot nga place to the eyes of the Christian leaders before. Now, the objections to the geokinetic and heliocentric idea involved astronomical observations, biblical passages, and epistemological principles. Now, because of his novel and important astronomical arguments, Copernicanism attracted new followers. Okay, one of which is another famous scientist, and I believe all of you knows, Galileo Galilei. Now, Galileo made astronomical discoveries in 1609 to 1612 by means of the newly invented microscope. Now, he saw mountains on the moon, satellites around Jupiter, phases exhibited by Venus, and sunspots, which did not only conclusively prove Copernicanism, but provided new evidence in its favor and refutations of some old objections. Now, Galileo became more explicit in his pursuit of heliocentrism, and this soon got him into trouble. Now, in February to March of 1615, one Dominican friar filed a written complaint against Galileo, and another one testified in person in front of the Roman Inquisition. Now, ilang giakusahan si Galileo of heresy. Heresy is having a belief or opinion contrary to orthodox religious doctrines for believing in the earth's motion. Okay? Si Galileo, because ning adhere man siya to the idea of Copernicus, the idea of heliocentrism, therefore, giakusahan siya sa church of og heresy. Now, before, during early times, pag you are accused gani of opposing the teachings and ideas of the Christian church, ila kang dakpon, ila kang i-persecute, ila kang parusahan. Okay? And Galileo Galilei was not exempted from that because of his adherence to the teachings of Copernicus. He was also in a difficult situation against the Christian church. Okay. Just because of his idea, of his belief on the earth's motion. Now, this painting here, shown in the slide, is entitled Galileo Facing the Roman Inquisition. This is painted by Cristiano Banti in 1857, depicting Galileo rather, when he faced the Roman Inquisition. The Roman Inquisition is the one nga nagpatawag sa iya. The Roman Inquisition is like a religious a religious nga tawag ani? Court, a religious court. They are composed of religious nga mga judge, which are the ones responsible for calling out persons accused of opposing the ideas and teachings of the Christian church before. Now, for the church, Galileo contradicts the scripture or the Bible and what it says. For example, the miracle in Joshua chapter 10, verses 12 to 13, which goes, "On the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, 'Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and you, moon, over the valley of Ajalon.' So the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, till the nation avenged itself on its enemies. As it is written in the book of Jashar, the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day." So from this passage from the Bible alone, we can see the adherence of the church to their belief nga wala lagi naglihok ang earth. The earth um, is not moving and is not revolving, and that the sun and all the other heavenly bodies are the ones revolving around planet earth. Okay, so according to them, just from this passage alone from the scripture, Galileo is contradicting their beliefs, their ideas, their teachings, and is thus dangerous to the church and must be punished. Now, the Inquisition launched an investigation. Galileo's writings were evaluated and other witnesses interrogated. The charges against Galileo were unsubstantiated. However, the officials started worrying about the status of heliocentrism and consulted a committee of experts. Okay? That time, medyo nag-worry na sila sa nagkataas nga believers of the idea on heliocentrism, and thus they consulted a committee of experts. Now, On February 24, 1616, the consultants unanimously reported the assessment that heliocentrism and was philosophically false and theologically heretical, or at least erroneous. So ning-stick yun sila sa ilang belief na no, heliocentrism is incorrect. And those who believe this idea should be held accountable, should face the church. Now, the following day, so that's February 25, 1616, the Inquisition, presided by then Pope Paul V, considered the case. Now, although it did not endorse the heresy recommendation, it accepted the judgments of scientific falsity and theological error and decided to prohibit the theory. Thus, on February 26, the Inquisition's most authoritative cardinal, Robert Bellarmine, met with Galileo in private and gave him the following warning. The Church was going to declare the idea of the Earth's motion false and contrary to Scripture, and so this theory could not be held or defended, which Galileo agreed to comply. So giwarningan sa church si Galileo na you should stop um, you should stop teaching your idea of heliocentrism, okay? Or else you would face further charges filed by the church, which Galileo agreed to comply naman po. Now, Galileo kept quiet until 1623, 7 years after the start of his trial, when a new pope in the person of Pope Urban VIII was elected. Now, this new pope was an admirer of Galileo. Now, Galileo then started examining the scientific and philosophical arguments from both sides. In 1623, he then published his work entitled Dialogue on the Two Chief World Systems, Ptolemaic and Copernican. Now, Ptolemaic belief is relating to the second century geographer and astronomer Ptolemy, okay? And especially to his belief that Earth is at the center of the universe with the sun, moon, and planets revolving around it. So that is what the Ptolemaic idea is all about. Now, the arguments for the Copernican side turned out to be stronger than that of the Ptolemaic, and although they were not conclusive, it showed that the Earth's motion was probably true. Okay, so this we have on the slide the a picture of Galileo's work entitled Dialogue on the Two Chief World Systems, Ptolemaic and Copernican. So in this book, in this work of Galileo, nagpresent siya og ideas both from his Copernican nga belief and the church's belief on geocentrism. Okay, now this book was a reasonable, clever, and indirect attempt to circumvent the 1616 prohibitions. Unfortunately, Galileo did not succeed. The Inquisition summoned him again to Rome, and the trial proceedings lasted from April to June 1633. He was then found guilty of suspected heresy for defending the Earth's motion and thus denying the authority of Scripture. Okay? Now, fortunately for Galileo, suspected heresy was not as serious a crime as formal heresy, and so his punishment was not death by being burned at the stake, but rather house arrest and the banning of his work, The Dialogue. Now, the Church's condemnation of Copernicanism and Galileo became the iconic illustration of the problematic relationship between science and religion. Okay? So again, luckily for Galileo though, ang iyaha lang kaso is suspected heresy, which before is not as serious as formal heresy. Now, those who face formal heresy will be punished by death. So, luckily for Galileo, he did not face such punishment. Now, not so long ago, The Vatican formally and publicly cleared Galileo of any wrongdoing. Before that, on 1822, the Church lifted the ban on dialogue, katong work ni Galileo, when it was common knowledge that the Earth was not the center of the universe. Now, Galileo died on 1692, yet it was only in the year 1992 did the Catholic Church acknowledge formally, publicly cleared him of any wrongdoing. Now, moving formally to rectify a wrong, Pope John Paul II acknowledged in a speech done on Rome in October 31, 1991, that the Roman Catholic Church had erred in condemning Galileo 359 years ago for asserting that the earth revolves around the sun. So bag-o lang duway na kay namatay si Galileo, but it was just in the year 1991 na the Christian Church finally accepted and apologized actually to Galileo for being punished, for having him punished when he was tried before for suspected heresy. Now, another scientist who supported Copernicus's ideas was not as fortunate as Galileo, though, in the person of Giordano Bruno. Now, Giordano Bruno was not as lucky, as I was saying, as Galileo. He was burned at the stake for expanding upon the ideas of Copernicus. Gisunog ni siya si Giordano Bruno for spreading the idea of Copernicus, katong heliocentrism. Okay? Now, Giordano Bruno also suggested the insightful theory that the other stars may have worlds revolving around them. He suggested that the universe may be infinite and populated with many worlds. Okay, and because of that, Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake and died. Now, to summarize, religion and science have always had an uneasy relationship, with one side or the other usually in the ascendancy. Perhaps the most balanced view is from Abdul Baha. Abdul Baha is the son of the founder of Baha'i faith. Now, this Baha'i faith is a relatively new religion wherein teachings specifically advocate for the establishment of the essential worth of all religions and the unity of all people. Kaning Baha'i faith, bag-o ni siya nga church. Okay, a newly created church wherein ang ilahang teachings is that all religions should be viewed in unity. Okay, and should not in a way oppose one another. Now, ang anak sa founder sa Baha'i faith, si Abdul Baha, stated that religion without science is superstition, and science without religion is materialism. Okay, this statement alone from Abdul Baha is giving us an idea that these two concepts should be viewed in relation to one another and not as opposing factors or opposing concepts. Now, how about you? What is your view on science versus religion?